Ashish, if you'd like to share a few points, again, I think with a very particular emphasis and a very particular experience, which is worthy of being shared.
Before I go into the particulars, uh, I'd just like to sum up and sort of place myself in the context of what has been said so far. Uh, Madhuji started uh, talking about the eras, and she briefly touched upon what is called the Vedic or the Mantrik Kal. And then we had the Kal of Tark, where we had, philosophical discussions and debates about lofty ideas of spirituality. And then we moved on to what is called the age of diversification, optimistically, where we were confronted with alien civilizations and assaults that we've been talking about. And this last era of Indian history is the one which is rife with all sorts of distortions and negationism. In fact, there's a book by Dr. Konrad Elst, which I would recommend to everyone, called Negationism in India, which details out facts about, incontestable facts about Indian history that no one seems to be willing to talk about. That said, Arjun talked about the river Saraswati and its central place in our universe, in our conceptual universe. Uh, and Shefali mentioned how she is, how she connects with that. Her ancestors were the people living on the banks. And in fact, I am connected with Shefali that way because my ancestors moved north to Kashmir while hers moved towards the south. So it's when we talk about the Aryan invasion theory and all these fancy speculative theories about our past, these things are not taken into account. And I hope that, with the kind of research that people like Arjun are doing, a lot of this will be debunked forever. And hopefully, we will uh, arrive at a situation where we can talk about these things from the certainty of scientific fact. Uh, a friend asked me about how the events of 1947 mattered to me. He said that you always talk about ancient India and things like Vedas and all the favorite Hindu jargon. And doesn't the fact that India became a modern republic, doesn't it really affect your consciousness? And I said that the events of 1947, the only thing that strikes me as significant is the partition. Uh, Other than that is just political rhetoric. I mean, I'm not even sure if India is really a free country, which Madhuji so eloquently described, with the influx of foreign funds and the control on the narrative. We don't even know whether we have a say in our own affairs. So, talking about the current situation in India, without acknowledging the fact that there is an uncertainty and there is a question mark on the very sovereignty of this republic, I think that that is something that is missing in the current discourse. Like I said, I come from Kashmir, and the state, as in the situation, not the political entity, the state of Kashmir has always been a reflection of the state of the Indian civilization. And when the Indian civilization flourished, Kashmir was really at the epitome, at the leading edge of spiritual and intellectual development. And when it fell, Kashmir was the first to fall and fall to the greatest depths. Uh, so in terms of that, I mean, the history of Kashmir also has a similar pattern, the Mantrik age and the age of discussions and philosophical thought. But when it comes to the age of diversification, Kashmir has a very, very bloody history. And it reflects in the fact that there was a demographic assault, and not just a physical warfare that was going on, but also it reflected in how the composition of the population was changing. Uh, and which culminated in 1990, when our community was displaced. And it is perhaps the final nail in the coffin for Kashmiri Hindus. Before that, it is said that there were 7 other exoduses that the community had. And I would think that, from that perspective, those are the key events in the history of my community, and which extends to, which is a commentary on the history of Hindus in general in this land. Uh, and now we are in a situation where we are not sure. I mean, although this word is often used for rhetorical purposes, which is genocide, but there is no doubt about the fact that our community has undergone a cultural genocide. We are people whose identity has been killed, and although we live, and by the grace of the Mother Goddess, whom we all prayed to, we survived physically, but our cultural identity is over. Uh, so that the events of 1990 are really a culmination of a long story of oppression and of continuous assault, of barbarism unleashed upon this only land that truly belongs to us. Uh, Now, these are all the negatives that we've spoken about, but I think that, I mean, if we were to take account of the positives, I think one of the most important the most important events in the modern history of India is the rise of Shivaji, for example, and that set that was really, I think, in my opinion, Guru Gobind Singh and Shivaji. That was the reversal of this onslaught. That was the reversal of the tide, and it followed with the rise of figures like Swami Vivekanand and Sri Aurobindo, who really sowed the seeds of intellectual resurgence and a spiritual resurgence, more than that. And what we are seeing, what we are witnessing now, I think we are in the middle of a key event, a key era where we are finally speaking up for ourselves. And I think that this is something that is a key takeaway from my reading of history, that right now, as we speak, we are undergoing a phenomenal upheaval, a phenomenal resurgence of Indian thought, of Hindu identity, whatever you want to call it. But this is something that we have learnt finally, and I believe that the seeds have been sown at least 150 years ago, and we are now beginning to see the fruits of that. So on that note, I think that this is the final. This is the era where we are actually looking into the future by taking a stock of things in the past.